Evolutionary Underground, episode 40, coming your way. Today, we're going to do a good one, and this is Mobster's topic that he wanted to talk about really, really bad. So, this is going to be a really fun one for those of you out there. It says it's what feeling big feels like and which products to bulk with using Euro Pharma. So, look, we're going to go over how adding a lot of muscle feels. So, this is a great episode for you guys who are skinnier, who maybe like me, growing up, you were a skinny kid, at recess, and then you started to bulk up and got bigger. How does that feel? Getting used to it and adapting. We're talking
Yeah,
about how to train for being big. So Mobster is going to give a lot of advice on this one. And then we're going to talk about Europharma, getting big products and how to use them. They have
yeah.
everything you could possibly need. And then we're going to talk about Europharma quality, why they are so trusted. So let's get into the first topic, Mobster. Talk about how adding a lot of muscle feels.
Yeah, look, guys, who hasn't dreamed, especially as Stevesmi says, if you felt undersized or underweight, or you just plain goddamn wanted to be bigger, and especially, I think this is especially true when you're in your teens and you're finding your way in the world, and maybe you're seeing it in the movies, maybe you're seeing it in the superhero type comics, maybe it's some sort of fantasy thing on TV with an advert and as a muscular athlete getting the girls and all that kind of jazz, right? And you imagine, you hope, you wish, you aspire to be in this big old motherfucker. If those of you that may have been intimidated by the bigger guys, the jocks at school, whatever, doesn't have to be for that reason, but that's not uncommon. And so the idea that you can be a quote unquote some big old motherfucker that no one's going to mess with. I've even heard the line, Steve, where C.T. Fletcher talks about wanting to be so big that the paving stones, the footpath would crack beneath his feet. And he was a big motherfucker back in the day for sure. So how does that actually feel? What is the difference in terms of sensation and your life and everything, parts of what going into it that you wouldn't understand perhaps and appreciate until you've experienced it? What's that like? How does that feel? So, I mean, the obvious thing, I'm 6'3", which makes me relatively tall as a humanity, especially in the first world, America, Europe, particularly Holland. I think they're now the tallest race on earth. They're getting towards my height's becoming actually kind of common. It's not the average height; it's still a little bit above average, but 6 foot, 6'1", I think in Holland, Steve, is kind of normal. But unless you're a fat motherfucker, being a muscular, big person, male or female, but we concentrate on men because that's where Steve and I are coming from, and it's the target audience. Being 300 pounds, being even 250 pounds at normal height, Steve, is big as fuck. What's that like? How does that feel? How do we get there? How do we make that happen? Are there problems that we tend to forget and so on and so forth? So let's give you an example. Both Steve and I would have experienced at certain times in our training career, the length of time that we've been going to the gym and working out and whatever else, we've had gains. And sometimes those gains, natural or assisted by PEDs, products, have been quite substantial. I've told stories about Steve. I think I was in my late teens, 17, 18 years of age, nearly 18, and I'd had my first actual holiday from work. I'd been at that particular company. In total, I was there 2.5 years. And I think I was nearly 2 years in when I actually took some proper time off and did this whole training thing. Bob Kennedy's from Muscle Mag International's training every other day routine. Half a body, the lower body one day, have a day off, then the upper body the next day, have a day off, and so on. And I added one extra meal, and I added, and you guys can look this shit up. It was literally skim milk powder and sugar, although I didn't know that at the time. Weider's weight gain number 7, and was having probably 1,000 calories just from that. And I went away. I came back 11 pounds heavier, Steve. Probably the biggest gain I've ever had, especially naturally, in a very short period of time, 2 weeks, 14 days. That's probably about 3/4 of a pound a day. every fucking day for the whole 14 days. I came back, the secretary and the accountant, both females, were like, what the fuck? I filled out my trousers, I filled out my shirt. I had to go and get some new work trousers, that whole vibe. I think I gained another time, Steve. I responded very well, but I was living in a police section house. So I was just eating canteen food, but I got out and bought some protein powder. I was training in the section house gym, but I also started creatine, and I responded incredibly well. And again, I think it was a 2 or 3 week period. I put on 9 pounds. Regular listeners will know that when I've used, and we'll discuss this when we're talking about Euro Pharmacy products later on, I've gone as high, my all-time highest body weight, as I've said on other shows, has been 336 pounds. And the absolute bulker of all time for me has been Susten Deca. You've got to remember, in terms of the gains, I've gone from, I didn't keep numbers when I first started training, but I started keeping regular training diaries and logs. And I recall being 175 pounds when I was age 18. So you can do the math. That was 130 pounds, 140 pounds plus gained over a very long period of time. The 336 pounds was just late last year, October of 2023, as we record this show in 2024. So I've been what most would consider very, very big. Equally, I've been around some actual fucking super freaks in terms of the strongmen, European standard, British standard, national standard, and for that matter, world stage standard strongmen. And these motherfuckers, you go in, I think it was 280, and you think you're big. And then you get surrounded by someone who was 280 when they were 18 or 19. And they're like close to 400 pounds, 330, 340, 350. And that's just like the average. So you get to be around those people and you get the sort of sensation of what you see them just walking, Steve. So as an example, and this applies to professional bodybuilders, high-end pro football players in America, and so on and so forth. When you get to see these people in the flesh, you realize that it's on another level. And you just to see them walking around, just to see them eating, you kind of start to get a sense of how that feels. So this is what we're going to really be getting into today. So let me give you some positives and some negatives. Do you fill up a lot more space? Absolutely. Steve can say this, I can say this. If Steve went from 150 to 170 or 170 to 190 pounds, as he probably has done back in the day, you literally notice, especially when you're younger, you're more aware of the fact that you are filling up more space. And I mean on seats, in cars. You have to make adjustments to seats. You have to sort of sit a certain way on public transport, on trains and buses, aeroplanes, and so on and so forth. There are memes with Eddie Hall, 2017 World's Strongest Man, sitting next to normal people on a short hop aeroplane, flying from one city to another city, and it's kind of almost a joke. We're not talking plus size in terms of obesity. We're talking about a little bit of fat, but so big, I think he was 420 pounds at his absolute biggest. And he's the same height as me, slightly shorter, actually, 6'2.5". And he's sitting next to normal people on an aeroplane. It's almost a joke because I think Eddie actually went out of his way to be like that, but he's sitting there on an aeroplane and they're wearing normal clothes and Eddie's in a shorts and a vest. So, for example, Steve, I've had clothes made. I can't go in and buy a suit as is. I have to go off and look for a pair of trousers and a jacket. I know when I've added muscle, my body sits differently. And I can feel, for example, Steve, right now I'm 324 pounds. My legs touch in a different place. And it feels kind of like you've added size to your legs because if your legs don't feel the same when you're walking around. They don't feel the same when you're standing up or getting out of a chair. They're touching in different places from where they was, say, a month ago. This kind of situation. What about you, Steve? How has it felt when you've added bulk, when you've put on new tissue, especially when you were younger? And talk about your best gains ever.
So, I was always that skinny kid, growing up, as I said earlier in the podcast. So my first year I had used steroids. First cycle, I gained about 20 pounds. And then over the course of the year, over the course of the first year, I'd gain a total of 30 pounds. So I went from 165 pounds, 7% body fat, to 195 pounds. and body fat was in the teens. So I did put on a lot of body fat as well, but I had room to bulk. And keep in mind, I'm only about 5'5", 5'6". So I'm about half a foot, more than half a foot shorter than Mobster. So obviously I have less room to put on a lot of weight. So being my height and being 195 pounds, that's pretty big. And the biggest I got was close to 200 pounds at my peak. So one of the things I would notice is, walking through hallways and walking through doors, that my shoulders became so wide and big that I would knock my shoulders into the wall or knock my shoulders into the hallway. I noticed in the gym, guys would respect me. They would ask me for spots. I'm in the gym. I'm one of the strongest dudes in the gym, even though I'm outweighed by 40, 50 pounds by a lot of these guys, but I was still stronger than them. So I was benching 3 plates, 4 reps. I was squatting 4 plates, 4 reps, no problem. They came to me like, hey, Steve, can you give me a spot? Because they trusted me. Like, hey, if I need help, this guy can help me. He's strong enough to help me. So feeling that respect from other guys was good. Also, women, my massage therapist one time told my girlfriend, like, oh, is that your boyfriend? Is he the big dude? Is he the big dude? And she made a big muscle, one of those, she like posed to my girlfriend. She's like, is that your boyfriend? And my girlfriend found that funny. She's like, she came to me and told me that story. She's like, yeah, I bet you like that. I bet you like that women describe you as being big and muscular. So if women are describing you to being big, muscular, and guys are asking you for spots in the gym, that's respect, right? So that makes you feel good, especially when you grew up, being insecure, being that kid that was, when you're skinny growing up and someone, bullies you in school, you can't do anything about it, because if you fight them, you're going to get your ass kicked because they outweigh you by 40, 50 pounds, so it's not, there's a reason there's weight classes in MMA and boxing. But I mean, obviously, if you weigh less, you can train and still kick their ass, even if you weigh less. But I never did that. So really, if you get bullied in school, you got to put up with it, or you got to have a big dude who's your buddy to stick up for you. So that's how it was with me. So being big and not feeling that insecurity anymore, it makes you feel good and it makes you feel confident in yourself. Go ahead.
I think there's an element of, and this especially applies to guys, looking like the big man or whatever else. I mean, I've literally gone to town, Steve, some years ago when I'm probably 30, 40 pounds less than I weigh now. And if I go to town where I was living, never mind here, when I was living in Gloucester, I'd walk down with Lawrence Charley. Lawrence Charley at that point was competing in the world's strongest man. And we literally got stopped in the street 5 minutes away from this burger place that we were going to go and treat ourselves to. It rave reviews, newspapers and whatever else, called Burger Star in Gloucester in Westgate Street, I think. And we got stopped by 2 gypsy fellas, pikers we call them over here. It's a bit of an insult. And they were asking about whether we trained or not. You look like you trained. I think at some point we got the whole, how much can you bench press? And then ironically, they did point out how silly this was. Literally the third thing was about steroids. So it was kind of weird. But when I was 280 pounds, 290 pounds, he's 330, 340 pounds then, and you're walking down the street, you are just taking up space. It's kind of weird. I'm going to talk about positives and negatives. So the positives, absolutely exactly what Steve described. I don't care what most women say. There's always going to be a percentage that likes being cuddled by a big man. There's always going to be a percentage that likes the idea of having someone that's strong that can protect them. That's normal shit. And that's normal shit whether you're normal size, if your man can protect your woman. That's just nature. That's just biology. And a male lion versus a female lion. And it doesn't mean you're any more or less aggressive, but it's just a natural thing for the other partner, whatever else, to protect them. And a big man, quote, not a better fighter, absolutely not. There's no such, you don't get to add 40 pounds of muscle and instantly become a better fighter. That's bullshit. But you do seem to fight less because people are just thinking, if he hits me, it's going to fucking hurt. What if he can fight? I'm fucked. So it just doesn't happen. And certain pseudo-aggressive, quote-unquote, macho type people look at you in a different kind of way. And there's always, like I said, a small percentage. Most women don't want a 300-pound Rick freak around the house. There's an element of the narcissistic to it. There's an element of it requires more looking after, all that kind of stuff. But there's still going to be a percentage that will be attracted to a big, muscular, strong, quote unquote, individual. So, guys, maybe the babe pool won't be quite as big, but don't worry, you'll still get some action in that particular regards. I've done perfectly fine when between 19 and 20 stone. 20 stone is 280 pounds. Maybe less nasty, but then I'm older and I'm not looking as hard. So swings and roundabouts. The negatives. So negatives would be, like I said, for example, when I've competed, and again, this will be 270, 280 pounds, I've done the 9-hour flights. And again, I'm not 6'3". There are people Steve's height that are my body weight, or was my body weight as I was then. Being that big is uncomfortable on an aeroplane. Being that big is uncomfortable in public transport. It can be difficult to get clothes. Most gym equipment is built for people that are average height. I'm talking about seat adjustments, handle placings. So you have to sometimes adjust the seat. You have to sort of sit a certain way in certain pieces of gym equipment, and so on and so forth. Stupid shit. And I say this in a kind of bitching way, but I also say it in a kind of prideful way. For the same reasons that Steve said about spotting certain machines, certain pieces of equipment. If I go to a fitness type gym, I would max out all the machines. I would max out most of the equipment. The places I would physically not be able to get enough weight loaded onto the machine to give me a proper workout. I've literally had to spend money, pleasurably, I might add, to buy equipment that could take the fucking weight, like bars that I've taken to my local gym or kept here in my own home gym, in order for me to be able to use it. Because if I bought a piece of equipment that was home delivered, for most people, I would bend it or I would break it. That sometimes happens in order to give me a challenge. Other things, food, Steve, you've got to eat. And I don't eat excessively. I don't eat thousands and thousands of calories a day more than a normal person. But by the same token, I've traveled and lost pounds in a weekend. I think £4 in a weekend. If I did normal shit and went and visited family and they ate the normal amount of food that everybody else ate, I could easily lose £4 traveling.
Yeah,
And when it started,
yeah,
yeah, go on, jump in.
let me jump in on this and I'll let you cover it. So that is a great point about the food. Like when I was going through this bulking phase, I'd get up in the morning. I was hungry because I was on steroid. We're going to talk about the steroid cycles that
Yes,
Mobster
yes,
and I were
yes, later
using.
on, yeah.
But obviously, Mobster mentioned Sustanon and Deca. Yes, those are going to boost your appetite in 95% of situations. So I was wake up in the morning hungry. I'd eat. I'd go to the gym. I'd come home. I'd eat again. Then I'd eat lunch. Then I'd eat
Yeah.
after lunch. Then I eat dinner. Then I eat before bed. It was like you're eating and eating. So the food bill is
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
crazy.
Yes.
Another thing too is you have to eat. When you're growing, you have to eat. What happens is your muscles become more insulin resistant. So you've got to keep carbing and throwing carbs and throwing protein at your muscles because your muscles need to be fed. The partitioning effects of steroids, especially these steroids that we're going to talk about that are more androgenic or more anabolic, they're going to require you to be eating constantly every 2 to 3 hours. So the food bill gets crazy. It became an annoyance, Mobster, because
Yes.
like let's say this was my lifestyle. I was dating 2 chicks at the time, at the same time, and they
Yeah.
kind of knew about each other, but they accepted it, right? But what I would do is a chick would come over for lunch. I'd work out in the morning. I'd have food. She'd come over. We'd bang, and then after we go have lunch, I take her out to lunch. Then we come back and we fuck again because you're horny as well
Yeah.
as
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because these
On the
steroids
on the
that
on the steroids, yeah.
these bulking steroids make you fucking horny too. So you gotta all you want to do is fuck and eat
Eat.
when
That's
you're going
right.
through this and you're growing at the same time. But the
Oh
problem
man.
is when you fuck, you gotta eat after because you're fucking hungry because you burn all those calories. So every
I've
time you
been
burn
giddy.
calories,
I've been giddy, Steve, because I have been doing something I shouldn't have been doing with more than one person at that time. And I've had to literally get up and have to go something to eat and then come back and have a cuddle or whatever. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's mad. It's madness. And people, this is the thing, right? You're having this fantasy of getting big and bulking up and whatever else. What you don't understand There's even an element, an argument, and this applies especially if you're a lean pro bodybuilder and want to be in shape, but you want to get bigger. The food for most people, Steve, is a pleasure. And there's still an element of, because it makes you hungry all the time, the way you described being able to eat it, but it becomes a necessity. Literally, if I don't eat, can't train. If I don't eat, I don't maintain my size. And that's without trying to bulk up. If you're trying to bulk up, it becomes something you've got to do. I've talked about this with Eddie Hall again. When Eddie Hall did his 500 kilo deadlift, he'd made this whole promise to his wife about doing this do or die, do the 500 kilo, win the world's strongest man, and then ease the fuck back off the crazy shit. That's PDs, that's training, that's trying to push your body to some crazy place. And there was a whole how it happened video, I think he put out, or it might be kind of like a little documentary. And she literally is putting the last spoonful of food like a baby into his mouth. And he's so tired from training, 4 hours training, 4 hours recovery, the rest of the day spent eating. And he's literally at that point when within a week or two, he's probably going to go and attempt the 500 kilo and be successful, as we know. And he is sitting at the dining table, the kitchen table, in fact. And she is putting us, I'm so tired, I'm so tired. And she's gone, Eddie, you got to eat. Yeah, but I don't want to. Eddie, you need to do this because of the promise you made. And you need to take this food to recover. And you need to take this food to get strong. And she is literally putting a spoonful of food into his mouth like a fucking baby in his high chair, Steve, at the table. It is that's how tired he was. That's how hard he's training. That's how crazy fucked up.
Yeah. At some point, at first it's okay, but over time it becomes a chore.
You can eat what you like. No, but yeah, I'm gonna be big. Yeah.
To constantly eat all and have to constantly go to the grocery store. You're in the grocery store, it feels like every other day.
Especially clean.
And you're like, where's the food going? It like just fucking goes down your throat and you're shitting it out. It's just a nonstop factory of you're consuming so much food. 4,000, 5,000 calories a day of high quality food is expensive. You're spending like 40, 50 bucks every other day on high quality food. It becomes expensive. The beef, the chicken, the carbs, the rice, all this stuff, it adds up.
High quality stuff, especially. I've seen right now, again, 2024, Steve, you'll know the answer to this. I am seeing memes and photographs being posted on Facebook by Americans talking about grocery bills. Now, some of these are tongue in cheek. This is my $300 grocery bill. And you can see an Xbox sitting in the back, and there's a couple of bags of crisp and an apple in front. But the reality is that you're paying prices in America that I don't think we're currently close to getting to. And our prices increases, of course. But your grocery prices, certain places in America are crazy for normal amounts of food. Now, if you're clean, if you're eating organic, and again, if you compete in bodybuilder, it's all chicken breast and high quality fish and high quality cuts of meat and organic fruit and vegetables and whatever else. And if the normal shopping's expensive, then that kind of lifestyle becomes that much more expensive. Food prep companies do perfectly reasonable amounts of food, etc., etc. I would physically need to have 2 portions of what most companies sell as food prep. In fact, I've literally just recently brought some sort of high protein meal type stuff, almost sensibly priced, from one of the supermarkets here, Aldi's. And that's just, I think that gives me 60 grams of protein for the equivalent of about $5 in a natural meal. But one on its own would not be enough for me. So you do that. A pro bodybuilder, again, it would be a good example, Steve. You almost have 2 outfits of clothing, one for when you're nearly 300 fucking pounds and one for when you're not. And the difference can and certainly was in the past, the difference between off-season and competition shape was 40 pounds. 40 pounds is about 3 sizes of clothing. I'm actually at that point again, even just with an example, on my desktop here on the PC, as we record this show, is a picture of me on my power squat machine, and I can see my neck bulging out. I think my collar size is now, to be comfortable, 21-inch collar. So again, clothing is especially proper clothing, Steve, not just casual shit. It can almost be, right, have you got any 21-inch collars? No. Do you have any 21-inch collar type clothing that isn't made for a fat fucker? I mean, I carry a bit of body fat and a little bit of a belly, but I'm not obese. So me trying to find something with a waist or with a taper or just that fits and hangs normally at my size with my neck size or my wrist size. My wrist size is about 1 to 2 inches more, because I'm more of a strength athlete, than the local, just behind the counter. We've got Lewis at the local gym. He's probably going to compete in the next year or two, doing fantastically well. And he's not skinny, and he doesn't have the tiny wrist that some professional bodybuilders do, but he's got a normal size wrist, and my wrist is about 1.5 inches fucking bigger, and he's only about an inch shorter than me. So just I can't even find. I have to literally look for, if I wear a wristwatch, Steve, it doesn't. I'm on the last hole on the wristwatch. So there's certain things you don't think about. There's certain things that are with the number one, and I want to finish on as a negative. The number one I want to finish on that a lot of people don't understand, and it's especially true. Actually, let me cover it in two ways. When I've put on a lot of muscle, and I said this to Steve in the pre-show, I've adapted to it, but it takes me roughly 12 weeks. And we might only be looking at 5 or 6 pounds of muscle. 5 or 6 pounds of muscle might, for example, it's about half an inch. 10 pounds of muscle on a normal height person is about an inch all over. And that's sitting on your chest, it's sitting on your rib cage, it's sitting on your shoulders, it's sitting on your legs. And just walking around with 10 pounds of new muscle, as an example, you don't instantly adapt to having 10 pounds of muscle. It is half a bag of groceries on your body, and you've done it in a matter of a few weeks, because obviously with PDs, we can bulk up relatively quickly. To get used to it, you have to accommodate the new food, you have to accommodate the new training, but just the physical sensation of having 10 pounds of muscle, especially if you've gained it relatively quickly, takes me typically 12 weeks to get used to. When I used to do my gains back in the day, I would blow the fuck up. I'd keep half my gains on cycle, off cycle, and then it would take me about 12 weeks to get used to that. And that might mean, for example, just knowing that I don't get as out of breath, or my cardio's back to normal, or that my blood pressure, my heart rate goes back down to where I was before, even with the 10 pounds additional on my body. So that's one side of that particular stuff. The other one I was going to say, which is more of a negative, because you could almost argue the last part is a positive, you just got to get used to it, is sleep apnea. And just on the forum right now, we've got a couple of people that are 250 plus, training heavy, kicking ass in the gym, etc., etc. And it's just started to talk about as a subject on our forums. By all means, come and check it out. How common, because we don't normally talk about it, but it is remarkably common, especially people my size and some of the strength athletes I've been around, that they find it difficult to sleep without either a sleep mask or a gum shield in their mouth or these nasal dilators or whatever else. And that's because, again, you are weighing more than most people in a smaller or bigger area on your bed, on your rib cage, on your chest, on your neck, on the pillows that you're using, most mattresses. My bed frame, Steve, when I came up here with the old bed frame, broke it because it got to see a lot of action, and then replaced it. And when I replaced it, because I was getting over 300 pounds, I literally went online and looked for heavy duty beds. So my bed is made out of steel, welded together and bolted together steel. The last one was something from IKEA. But my bed can take up to 175 kilograms, which is 380 something fucking pounds per person, and obviously a mattress, etc., on top of that, and your duvets and your covers and your sheets, pillows, and so on. But I needed something that wasn't going to collapse. I will wear out mattresses quicker. So sleep apnea, the ability, your literally the size of your neck, your big chest, the muscle that you've put on, can your body, almost when it comes to sleep apnea, never adapts. It will only go adapt back if at the end of your training career, when you lose that weight. It's surprisingly common, and it can be, you might have to have a bolster, you might have to adjust your pillows or your mattress, have a special kind of bed. And as I said, at the extreme end, and I've got buddies that actually have this CPAP mask. I've forgotten what it's actually that stands for, but it looks like something from the Alien movie. Steve, they are literally wearing a full face, or full, it goes over the nose and the mouth mask, and it forces air into the lungs, and it stops you losing sleep through the night. So it's one of those sort of things that most people won't think about. And I guarantee you, Steve, that there are top Olympian type level bodybuilders that you almost never hear them talk about this. And I'm thinking of the Derek Lunsfords, the Hadi Chupans, etc., etc. The absolute freak of freaks, where it's very rare for you to hear them talk about it, but it would be remarkably common that the top level pros that are carrying 20-inch arms or more, nigh on 60-inch chest, 30-inch plus thighs on a normal frame, certainly normal height, and typically slightly less at the top end, that kind of muscle, 250 plus pounds of muscle, I would guarantee you that there are people out there having sleep issues or using a CPAP mask in order to be able to be the absolute freak of freaks. So it's a price you're prepared to pay. I just want to give it as a clarification, guys, because I'm not moaning and bitching. I don't think Steve is either. We enjoy being big and fucking strong. We enjoy having this fucking muscle. But sometimes there's prices that you need to be aware of. Now, getting into the specifics of training nutrition. Training. What I mean, so like I said, we're not really talking, I think, Steve, at the freak of freak type levels. There's always going to be differences in training volume and frequency and the weights lifted and so on and so forth. But typically, generally speaking, if you want to be really, really big, you need to leave a lot of weight, more than most gym users, for more reps. It doesn't necessarily require an additional amount of volume. In fact, I'd argue less, because the higher the weight, the bigger of an impact it's going to have on your body. But you need to be able to do certain rep ranges. So what am I talking about? You will not become the freak of freaks unless you have absolutely godlike genetics benching 200 pounds. It's going to be 300, 400, 500 fucking pounds. You will need to be doing 400, 500, 600 pound squats. You will need to be going 1,000 plus pounds on a leg press. And unlike a strength athlete like myself, you'll be needing to do that for a minimum of these kind of numbers, Steve, typically of 8 to 12 reps. So if I was a smaller athlete, me being able to press 200 or bench 300 is quite reasonable. And the percentage of people in the world, never mind in gyms, but in the world that can bench, for example, 300 pounds is relatively small. It's less than 5% of the whole population of the planet. But you're trying to be a freak of fucking freaks. So you're not talking about 5%, you're talking about 1%. And in order for you to be huge and bulked and absolutely fucking pavement cracking motherfucker that people are going to ask to spot in the gym and all that kind of fucked up shit that Steve and I have talked about already, you're going to need to be doing that kind of stuff for repetitions. So you need to be doing multiple sets of 6, 7, 8, 9 reps minimum with 300 pounds. You need to be up there with the, you need to be down the dirty end of the dumbbell rack where you have to blow the cobweb off the big motherfuckers. And you don't need to be doing that for a couple of repetitions like a strength athlete. You need to be repping that shit. You need to be 3/4 of the way down or all the way down on the stacks of most machines. You don't necessarily, although that can come, especially if you compete, be doing all the polishing and detail type exercises. The big compounds will always put the muscle up. But again, it's the repetition with a decent amount of weight type stuff. So some gyms will have these pieces of equipment, some will not. But I'm thinking, Steve, you're looking at a 200 pound or more press for reps. You're looking at 300 to 400 pound benching. You're looking, like I said, 400, 500, 600 pound for reps on the squat. You need to be doing rack pulls with 4 or 5 plates aside and all this kind of stuff. And if you want to disagree with me, fine. Go to pretty much any gym anywhere in America or the UK and look at what the big fuckers are doing. Look at what the short big fuckers are doing. If they've got a lot of muscle in their body, 9 times out of 10, they're either doing that or they've done it. And then what they're doing now is maintaining it. But they would have done that stuff before if they're not doing it now, or they're doing that stuff now. Or they'll do this stuff for a certain period of the year to get that muscle to be where it is, and then spend the rest of the year polishing that muscle, getting into shape for competitions and so on and so forth. What do you think on the training side of things, Steve, in terms of putting on great big fucking pounds of muscle?
I think first of all, you've got to train at a place. You've got to find a gym that caters to what you need. And
Yes.
Look, at the end of the day, you've got to find like a meathead gym. You got to find a gym that has the equipment. You can't be using just a Smith machine. You can't be using, 70 or 80 pound, bars. Okay. Where you can, just do deadlifts like that. You've got to have a deadlift section that you can actually do deadlifts and cleans. You got to do these compound lifts. These are the secrets to getting bigger and getting stronger, and I was able to get bigger because of that, because I had access to these types of gyms. And a lot of you may not have access to those types of gyms. So I tell you, if you don't, it's okay. Don't panic. Get your own equipment at home. You don't need to get an entire gym, but get some equipment that you can actually do at home. Get a mat, get a bar, get some rubber weights, and do it at home. Get maybe a squat rack and then go that direction, Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, let me give you an example, and it's one of those things you wouldn't think about. A buddy of mine, Ashley, has a extra long, almost elephant bar type bar at my local gym, which is locked away in a corner, and he can get out when he wants it. I've literally just taken down one of my safety squat bars for me to be able to use, because the one at the gym was rated to, I was already using way more on that than the rating, and the new bar is rated to more than I could ever squat. And I'm quite happy to leave it down there for other people to use. Mine's not locked away; it doesn't bother me. But that's been a necessity. My local gym takes a certain thing from that. I'm up on the wall, Steve. So, for example, the ability for me to do fucked up shit is actually good. We got a lot. In the minute, we've had a lot of university and college students go in there in the daytime because of the summer holidays here. So they've got a break from uni, and I was literally showing two university students a 3-inch wrist roller shit yesterday, and I was doing 83 and 3/4 kilos, so 100 and close to 190 pounds, and I had them doing 44 pounds, but fucking shit up because I don't mind showing, and of course, these freaky veins on my forearms and doing crazy shit. That I could have a workout at a normal gym, absolutely, but I couldn't do the kind of stuff that I need to do on a regular basis to get to become a fucking freak, Steve. And yeah, look, on the food thing again, just to finish on the food thing before we move on. Right. So I'm not obsessed the way that I might need to be if I was a bodybuilder with my protein levels, but at the same time, you see me in the supermarket buying food, I will be picking up things. And so I picked up a 2 kilo, 4.4 pound lasagna the other day, and it was like 8 or 9% protein. What the fuck is this shit? Loads and loads and loads of calories, but really low protein. So I will have 4, I think it was like all the day for tea yesterday, very close to, let me think now, 14 ounces of burger meat yesterday for my tea. So this is a regular thing for me, making sure that the certain foods have higher protein content, even though I don't go to the whole 300 grams, I still want to be getting 180, 200 grams of protein or more into my diet. I will have protein powders here. I will make sure that my food is calorie dense. If I don't want to be sitting there eating all fucking day, then it needs to have a certain amount of calories in, and so on and so forth. And it's moderately expensive for me because I'm not obsessed about it. But nevertheless, it's a requirement. One of the things, and we talked about this before, Steve said with Sus and Decker, which we're going to discuss shortly. I have sat there, and I've said this on other shows, and both Steve and I agreed, said it would made you so hungry that I would be literally satisfying my hunger with a meal, but I was already thinking about the next thing to eat. So you do need to be thinking about these things, and it is a thing. Right? Again, I was having when I gained that 11 pounds back in the day, Steve. That was on 3 square meals a day. You know what my mum made is what I ate. But for me to grow, I had to cook more food for me. So I had an extra meal, and then I was having the protein weight gainer type drink as well. So these become a necessity, and you need to do that. Guys, if you want to bulk, and I'll just say this from what I've seen occasionally on the forum, and you quote unquote eat all the time, you do not. I eat everything, you do not. And I eat loads and I can't gain, you're a liar. And I'm going to say that in a horrible way because it's true. You need literally to look at what you're eating. And 9 times out of 10, when we challenge members to do this, they're not eating what they think they're eating. The food that they're eating is kind of half empty in terms of calorific density. They're overestimating what they think they're eating, and so on and so forth. Literally, we would, even if you gained fat, for us, it would be one more meal, and instantly you would start to put on a little tiny bit of muscle, a little tiny bit of body fat. Okay, let's see what you're eating, moderate it, fix it, make you have that extra meal, make you have that extra high protein snack, and I guarantee you that you would put on weight. And this is especially true if you are less than close to your maximum, if you are at the beginning of your journey in terms of training and getting bigger and bulking up and so on and so forth. It's not so true if you are close to your genetic maximum. It's much harder. Of course it is. I'm not going to be 350 pounds. I might, maybe, and it's not healthy at that body weight, possibly, Steve, this cycle, maybe get to 340. I don't think so, but who knows? So, but getting sometimes if you're underweight and you want to add muscle, you quite often underestimate what you're doing in terms of your training, certainly underestimate in terms of your nutrition. And as often as not, don't realize just how physically active you are. So, for example, one last particular tip in that area, Steve, look at what else you guys are doing. And this especially applies to the younger. I know it applies to me and Steve. We were way more active when we were younger than we are now, and certainly way more active physically uh, before we started to grow into the little monsters or big monsters that we are today. So what do I mean? I used to run to work, Steve. I was running, let me think, 5 days a week to work. I ran at weekends. I would run one evening during the week. And I was also doing Taekwondo as well as trying to hit the gym. And my job was physically active. Did I gain during those times? Did I? Fuck. Not a chance. I was working like a motherfucker. I was doing the long days. I'm literally physically running 2 miles to work every morning, taking the bus home over night time after the day's work, running 10K at the weekends and all this kind of stuff. And youngsters, you forget. I played a little bit of touch basketball, touch football. We went down to the squash club. You forget these other things, and you don't realize that you've missed a meal. You don't realize that staying up late to go to that party. You don't realize that how many of these little sports that you're only goofing around with your buddies are burning calories. And so you need to sometimes look at your diet. Literally keep a food diary, same as if you was obese and wanted to lose weight. Keep a food diary. Realize that you missed a couple of meals, realize that you took some shortcuts that you shouldn't have taken, look at your activity levels. A coach would especially do this. So what else are you doing? Because quite often, like when we go to a doctor's sleep, we forget things. And it's only when we include those pieces of information that someone is going to help us, like a coach or this podcast or on the forums. What you're doing is a 12-hour job down the steel mill. That's not going to help you bulk. You're running to work every day. You are playing a sport that you forgot to mention. Your hobby is physically active, this kind of stuff. And it's not gym training, it's something else. It might be rock climbing, Stevens. Now we realize that you're missing meals, not training as hard as you thought you was, more physically active than you thought you was, and so on and so forth. And we slow you the fuck down, get you to eat more food, and lo and behold, you've got on a few pounds of muscle. So let's talk about the actual products now. Now, 101. Now, I could literally go through the list here, Steve, but talk about your favorite bulking steroids, and especially when we're talking about Euro Pharma products here.
Yeah, and we're both going to have, similar steroids that we like.
Yeah, because they work. Yeah.
Yeah. And the first one I use is Dianabol, and Dianabol is a great one. Look, #1 selling oral steroid of all time. It's going to increase your appetite, increase your bulk. You're going to be wanting to eat and fuck on this stuff. And the dose I was taking was 20 to 30 milligrams a day. The dose that you're going to want to take anywhere from 10 to 50 milligrams a day. And it works great, as a Kickstarter. It works great as a stack with testosterone if you really want to bulk up big time. So that is going to be the best option. Trenbolone is another one. And look, it's a great nutrient partitioner. You're going to want to eat. You're going to want to fuck on Tren. You're going to want to train on Tren. And anywhere from 150 to 400 milligrams a week. And Euro Pharma has some great Trenbolone options. They have blends of Tren. They have ACE. They have E. They have Hex. All kinds of different trend options. So I'd start out with ACE if it's your first time.
Yeah.
And you'll get really good results on it.
I'm looking at their Enanthate as well here, Steve. I mean, I would agree with Steve on the D-Bowl 100%. Some of my best gains have been 30 milligrams. The top end for me when I've taken it has been 50 milligrams over short periods of time. And we're looking, for me, I know that the different recommendations, but we're looking at bulk here. So for me, 6 to 8 weeks of low dose D-Bowl, I've absolutely blown up. On other options, Steve, would be Anadrol. And I know, and we talked about this on other shows when we specifically discussed Anadrol. I know motherfuckers that have gained 20 pounds, 21 pounds is a number that spins mind on Anadrol. And ironically, this is one of the few PEDs where you actually dose it less than you use medically, but you're still looking at 25 milligrams twice a day, again for about 6 to 8 weeks. And if you respond very well to Anadrol, as some users do, you will blow the fuck up. As I said, first-time users, I think I wouldn't normally recommend it for first-time users, but I have heard, as I said, for first-time users, 20 fucking pounds. I actually think that would be almost too much in terms of the oral side of things. In terms of the injectables. I've talked about this before because Euro Pharmacies has produced both a product called a testosterone blend as well as an actual product called Sustanon, both around 250 milligrams. We know that there's a multiple esters and the Deca, which we've talked about before as well. And again, I literally just started the Deca and Sustanon cycle this week. I'm only going to run it for a short period of time. When I did the bulk last year, that was for a cut for 4 weeks and then a bulk for 4 weeks. And I'm going to be using 500 milligrams total, so that's 250 milligrams of each, roughly every 5 days. I'm keeping my TRT with the testcipionate at 200 milligrams, so that's going to approximate around the 700 to 800 milligrams total per week, based over 7 days, closer maybe to 900. I need to work this out, Steve, but I want to keep it all under a gram. And like I said, last year, guys, doing it every 4 days with no TRT, I blew up to 336 pounds. So for me, that is an absolute fucking golden cycle. On the trend that Steve's already mentioned, recomposition drug of the century. The number one issue, and I don't care where you get the trend from, is always going to be the side effects. And one of I've talked about earlier on in terms of the things that are positive as well as negative about gaining. I know of very, very big, and I've talked about this before, strength athletes that have used trend because it's enhanced their strength quite ridiculously. In fact, Steve's talked about how strong he got on trend as well. But and I think it's the side effects, Steve, and I've said this before, especially seem to apply if you're bulking or if your body fat is a little bit higher. And it doesn't have to be a lot higher, but we're talking about 15, 16%. If it's 12, 10%, the side effect seems to be less. So I know, and I'll quote Lawrence Charlet again, talking about using trend for a brief period of time back in the day. I have no idea what he currently uses. We don't have those conversations, but sweating like an absolute motherfucker. And even the other guys that were using trend joked about how bad this was, having to get out of bed, change the sheets, change the t-shirt, get back in the bed. You're almost having to separate from the partner, the girlfriend, the wife, whatever in bed, because you're positively glowing with metabolic heat. And the reason for this is the same as anything else. And in fact, some of these apply to the other PEDs as well, Steve, is that because you are burning that many more calories in terms of what you actually physically doing in the gym, especially the bigger you get, the more calories you burn, the sheer amount of food that you're putting in, the fuel for that furnace, and then using anabolics at the same time. So absolutely, Steve. I know that a lot of you listeners that have used testosterone. So, for example, I could easily talk about, and I've discussed this before, remembering, of course, of Sustanon as a blend of testosterones. Cypionate works perfectly fine. Enanthate works perfectly fine. But I suspect, Steve, what would you think in terms of dosing? Because I'm thinking for most users, I do moderately well under a gram. For most users, are we looking at 500 milligrams or more? What are we talking about in terms of actual dosages? We'll have a look at a few more products.
All your testosterones, I'd say 500 is the average. So anywhere from 100, which is like a TRT dose, up to 1,000 milligrams. But I don't see any reason to go more than 500 or 750 if you're using it solo. I've used up to 750 myself and got great results, but 500 is great, especially when you're stacking it. So I would look definitely into stacking something. I like the DECA option. NPP, if you want a shorter ester, is also a good option.
What about Steve? Sorry, Winstrol or EQ? I know some people benefit bulking on both those products when normally we would call them cutters.
No, I want to bulk with Winstrol, but Equipoise, if you want a
Yes.
mild bulker, not something that's going to really blow you up, but just a mild bulker, some changes to appetite, just depends on how fast you grow. That would be an option. So anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams a week of the
Let me talk about mild bulking again as well, guys. And I actually said this to Steve in a pre-show, so I'm going to jump in here for a second where we talk about a couple more products, mild bulking. And so what do I mean by that? So what I said to Steve in the pre-show, I said the reality of the situation is, although the dream might be to add 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, and we still get to see the occasional forum post that talks about that, I've said really you don't want to do that. So in terms of keepable gains, bulking up over time, and specifically if you do moderate cycles, but multiple times per year. Steve and I have talked about this. 3 to 5 pounds of muscle, 2 to 3 times a year, is 9 to 15 pounds of muscle. It's a lot of muscle over a longer period of time, whether it's a lot of muscle or a lot of bulk in a short period of time. So, for example, when we talk about Winstrol and EQ, we might not argue as those as bulkers, but certainly adding 5 pounds of new tissue, a little bit of fat, but mostly muscle. Let's say it's 4 pounds of muscle, pound of fat, Steve. Then I would absolutely look at something, especially EQ, as a moderate bulker. I would look at Anavar, for example. I always used to add, when I was, and I've talked about this on other shows, as much as I like Anavar as strength, I would always add around, if I bulked up the Sussen deck at 20 pounds, on Anavar, I would still add 5 pounds of tissue on cycle. And at that period of time, I wasn't trying to keep it, but the listener might. So adding 3 to 5 pounds of muscle, what people call a lean bulk, in reality is probably the best way to go. So talk about if you were doing PED, Steve, and you wanted a lean bulk, 5 pounds of new tissue. We're not talking about 10, 15, 20 pounds, but almost a few pounds at a time, 2 to 3 times a year. Again, the dosages. So for example, I might look at the testing amphate, Steve, 300 to 500 milligrams a week. And for example, the EQ, 300 milligrams. And I could run that a lot longer than I would run the orals. I might run that for 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks. I personally wouldn't, but I know a lot of listeners would run it after 16 weeks. So talk about lean bulking options here.
Yeah, so just lean bulking. Look, I think equipoise is good, like I said, but I think running lower doses across the board you could get away with lean bulking. Lower dose of testosterone, lower dose of tren, lower dose of EQ, lower dose of even the orals. And that would be a way you can do more lean bulking that way, and just stacking it with Proviron, for example. That would be an option. Also, keep in mind with water retention. Euro
Yes.
Pharmacies, they have AI options. They Arimidex and their Romacin. So those are really smart to do. You don't want to blow up a bunch of water,
No.
and we're going to talk about that in a future podcast. And we have talked about that, but there's a difference between bulking and just adding a bunch of water. So you want to keep in mind, they're not the same thing.
Yeah, let me finish on that particular thought, Steve. One of the key things here, guys, whether it's a lean bulk or just out and out sheer fucking mass, is keeping. Why train your ass off and do those crazy weights and take your PEDs if you're not keeping that tissue? So again, with the Euro Pharma ancillaries, we're looking to moderate. We don't want to blow up, as Steve said, a bunch of water and then lose all that water and all our gains, quote unquote, disappear. We've seen people say that. We don't want to take a load of PEDs on cycle and then have a potential for side effects if, for example, adding 3 to 5 pounds of tissue is much more capable and it's much easier to adapt to, and so on and so forth. Even like I said, if I throw 20 pounds or 20 pounds on, 10 or 20 pounds on, Steve, it would take me, as I said earlier on, 3 months, 12 weeks to get used to being that bit much bigger. And it might even be less. 10 pounds is still something that I noticed, but 5 pounds is a lot easier to deal with. There's a little give in my clothing. I don't suddenly blow off into the next seat on an aeroplane or whatever because I've added 5 pounds. It's more comfortable. And arguably, again, I think sometimes, especially as this applies to the new listeners, the younger listeners, the people that are aspiring to get really, really big, don't try to do everything all at once. And what do I mean by that? When we talk about this stuff, if a person comes onto the forum and wants to blow up by 20 pounds, it feels like they want to blow up by 20 pounds on the first cycle, the cycle we're going to talk about. No. Why don't you think in terms of multiple cycles? Why don't we, for example, injectables, you could do 2 12-week cycles, which is 24 weeks, and it still gives you 28 weeks of the year to adapt, to get over the fact you've been on cycle, to recover from the cycle, to consolidate the gains, and then do another cycle. You could do 3 8-week cycles and still have the 28 weeks that I've just pointed out left for the rest of the year to get used to those oral cycles. And you'll still only be looking, and again, 3 8-week oral cycles, Steve, if you gained 4 pounds, would be 12 pounds of tissue. That is over an inch on your body all over. It's much easier for you to get used to. It's a lot easier to adapt to the new food and the training. So make sure that you do tweak your training and your diet to hold on to that muscle tissue. There's no point blowing up like a motherfucker and losing it all straight away. We're going to finish on now, Steve. Euro Pharmacies. Why? Listen, guys, if you listen to these shows on a regular basis, you know that I'm a fan of Euro Pharmacies. I'm a fan of Euro Pharmacies because to me, it is literally, we've got a product here in the UK where the phrase they use in the advert, Steve, is it does what it says on the tin. I think there's a company called Ronseal. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if I get Debo, it's Debo, and I know that I'm going to gain this amount of muscle on Debo. If I take the Anavar, it's Anavar. And I've seen the certificates analysis. They literally posted some yesterday on the forums for you to check out across the whole of their product range. It does what it says on the tin. It's the solid enanthate, solid trend. These are all products that you can trust. If you want to take, for example, my testipinate is from Euro Pharmacies. The Anavar that I've used on a previous recent cycle was from Euro Pharmacies. And it's like that all the time, Steve. There are other brands and products that we will talk about. And if we've tried them or used them or seen the certificates of analysis for those products, then we can say that, yes, they're a good brand or whatever else. But for me, Euro Pharmacies is my daily go-to. It's what I will have here to show people. I can hold them up to the camera when Steve and I have been talking and say, look, this is my little stash here, Steve, and this is what we're talking about right now. Not just looking at their website when we do these shows, but physically have their product here to look at and have used it. If I say, for example, Steve, that I've used an injectable and I don't get any post-injection pain, it's because I've literally, while I'm doing this show right now, talking to you, listener, got some of their injectables on my desk in front of me. So that to me is the reason why I like Euro Pharmacies. Their customer service is on point. Their reps, as one specifically springs to mind, is fucking amazing. Any issues that they've ever had in terms of products or is getting deliveries out to customers or whatever has been resolved super quickly, and always the customer satisfaction. And like I said, in terms of the certificates of analysis, literally someone said, asked a question about Euro Pharmacies yesterday, Steve, said, you know, should I see some companies and brands put up certificates of analysis. I think that's what they were called. This is what they said. And within, I think, an hour, one of the reps was on the forum and posted a bunch of screenshots from certificates of analysis, test samples of products that had been to a lab and had those products tested, and they could show you literally across the main product range of all their most popular products what these certificates and tests have come back at for. So listen, this is for me the reason why I want any company that I deal with, or want any company's product that I use. And I literally just had this discussion, I think 2 days ago at my local gym, leg day, Monday. And I was saying, this is the kind of stuff that I want to see if I'm going to use a company's product. Do I get post-injection pain? Is it smooth going in? Is the dosing on point? Do other users I know have used that product? Guys at my local gym would use product that's been sold to them, and sometimes I've never heard of the company, Steve, which almost certainly means it's some UGL here in South Wales that's knocking out whatever the fuck. The way that PEDs and without any medication I want to put into my body, I want to know where it comes from. I want to know that it's clean. I want to know it's usable, meaning there's no post-injection pain, that the oils are, I get on with the oils, I get on with the way the product's been put together. And certainly for me now at this particular stage, and I'm almost analytical in that particular way, Steve, when it comes to training, if I want to put X weight on the bar and hit some great number, if I want to put on X amount of pounds of muscle, it requires me to eat this amount of food and train this amount of time. All things being equal, especially if I'm coming to the game new, as some of our listeners will be, I know that I apply at this time. I know that I eat with my knife and fork at the dining room table. I should gain the size I'm going to gain. Now, you know, all things being equal, that might be £3, it might be £20. But with Euro Pharma, I know that I'm going to do those things because it's one part of the process, and I need to be able to trust that part of the process. I need to know that the products that I'm using, the steroids I'm using, the anabolics I'm using, the ancillaries I'm using, are dosed properly, effectively, and they do, as per the product at the beginning, Steve, what they said on the tin. So let us know what you think on that, guys. What does it feel like to bulk up like an absolute motherfucker? Have you been that way back in the day? What's it like putting on 20 pounds of muscle? What do you think on that? Is that what you want? Do you want to be the next freak of freaks? Have you had problems with shoes and clothes? How bad is it sometimes when you have to go shopping for that kind of stuff? What about those long flights? Has it been really, really horrible when you've had massive, massive shoulders or really, really big arms? Do you still get the babes? We want to know what you think on these subjects. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.